Okay, let's just state the obvious right up front. We've got two nations, Iran and Israel, locked in open war. But here's the thing that's so wild. They don't even share a border. There's no, long history of colonial beef between them. So the question is a big one. How on earth did we get here? You see, for decades, this whole thing was a shadow war. It was fought in the dark, through assassinations, cyber attacks, and using other groups to do the fighting for them on someone else's turf. Now, a lot of experts, they saw a direct war coming. They knew it was on the horizon. But I don't think anyone, literally anyone, predicted it would blow up this fast. So to really get what's happening right now, we've got to rewind the clock, and I mean way back, over 100 years. We're going to talk about a collapsing empire, the birth of a brand new nation, and one single revolution that, well, it changed absolutely everything. All right, so let's get into it. You have to picture this. At the start of the 20th century, the Ottoman Empire had been running the Middle East for 600 years. I mean, that's an incredible amount of time. But then they made a bad bet. They sided with Germany in World War I. And poof, the whole thing just collapsed. So who steps into that power vacuum? Britain and France. And they just start drawing lines on a map, creating new countries with, let's be honest, very little thought for the people who actually lived there. And one of the territories they carved out was a place called Mandatory Palestine. And it's right here, in this newly created territory, that the seeds of this entire conflict were planted. See, for centuries, Jewish people in Europe had faced horrific persecution. This gave rise to a new political movement called Zionism. And the core idea was honestly pretty straightforward, but also incredibly powerful. Jewish people needed a place to call home, a place where they could finally be safe. And for them, that homeland had to be their ancient biblical one, Palestine.
Now, this is where things get really messy and, frankly, kind of fascinating. Britain basically put itself in an impossible spot. To win World War I, they started making promises to, well, everyone. On one hand, they promised Arab leaders their own independent nations if they'd help fight the Ottomans. But on the other hand, they turned around and promised Jewish leaders they'd support a national home for them in the exact same land. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. The promises were completely contradictory, and the British knew it. So, as you can imagine, tensions just started ratcheting up as more Jewish people began immigrating, especially as the Nazis rose to power in Germany. And then, the Holocaust happened. The systematic murder of 6 million Jews just created this unstoppable global momentum. The world decided a Jewish state had to happen. Britain, totally worn out from the war, basically washed its hands of the problem and tossed it to the newly formed United Nations. And on May 14th, 1948, the State of Israel declared its independence. And this is such a critical point. For the new Israelis, this was a dream come true, their war of independence. But for the Palestinians living there, it was the Nakba, which means the catastrophe. Think about it. Over 700,000 people either fled or were forced out of their homes. This created a massive refugee crisis that, to this day, has never been resolved. Okay, so you're probably wondering, where is Iran in all this? And that's the multi-million-dollar question, right? At the time, Iran was, well, it was almost a non-player. It's crucial to remember, Iran isn't an Arab country. It's Persian. And under its ruler, the Shah, they didn't really have a dog in this fight. In fact, and this might surprise you, they actually had pretty normal, quiet, diplomatic, and even military relationships with Israel. And that quiet relationship sets the stage perfectly for the one single event that was about to flip the entire board and turn that quiet neighbor into a mortal enemy. The backstory here really kicks off in 1953. Iran had a democratically elected prime minister, a guy named Mossadegh, who was really popular. And he did something huge. He nationalized Iran's oil industry. He basically said, this is our oil, not Britain's. Well, the CIA and British intelligence did not like that, so they worked together to orchestrate a coup and threw him out of power. They put the Shah back on the throne, but now he was essentially a puppet of the United States. And for the Iranian people, this was a deep, deep humiliation that they never, ever forgot. It just simmered under the surface for decades.
And when that simmering anger finally boiled over, wow, the change was literally night and day. We're talking 1979. Mass protests explode across the country. The Shah flees for his life, and the exiled cleric Ayatollah Khomeini returns in triumph. In an instant, Iran's entire foreign policy just gets turned completely upside down. The U.S. goes from ally to the great Satan. And Israel? as America's closest friend in the region, it automatically becomes a sworn ideological enemy.
Iran became something totally different, a theocracy. That just means a government ruled by religious leaders and religious law. And you have to understand this point. It is so important. The new hatred for Israel wasn't about a border dispute. It wasn't about resources. It was purely ideological. This new revolutionary government saw Israel as an illegitimate Western implant right in the heart of the Muslim world.
And it didn't take long for this new ideology to become a hard-nosed military strategy. Right after the revolution, neighboring Iraq invaded, kicking off a brutal 8-year-long war. And it was in the crucible of that war that Iran forged the playbook it would use against its enemies for the next 4 decades.
Just think about that number for a second. Over 1 million people died. And during that whole time, Iran was basically alone on the world stage. The West was actually quietly helping Iraq. So this horrific war taught Iran's new leaders 2 absolutely critical lessons. Lesson 1, you can't trust anyone. You're on your own. And lesson 2, we can never afford to fight a direct, head-on war like this ever again. We need a different way to project power.
And that led them directly to the 2-pronged strategy they still use today. It's pretty simple, really. Prong number 1, go for a nuclear program. That's the ultimate insurance policy to make sure no one ever attacks you directly. And prong number 2, build a network of friendly militias all around the region, what we call proxies, who can fight your enemies for you, so you don't have to.
So a proxy war, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's getting someone else to fight your battles for you. It's brilliant in a way, right? It allowed Iran to wage a constant, low-level war against Israel for years, all without having to fire a single missile or send a single soldier from its own territory.
So over the next few decades, that's exactly what Iran did. They built what many call a ring of fire. They poured money and weapons into groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, the Houthis in Yemen, you name it. They essentially created this whole network of militant groups to surround Israel, and all the strings led right back to Tehran. Now, for a long, long time, this shadow war had a sort of unwritten rulebook. Both sides kind of knew how far they could go without starting an all-out war. It was a dangerous game, but a game with rules. But then a whole series of events happened, one after another, that just took that rulebook and shredded it.
And man, did it happen fast. It felt like a series of dominoes falling. First, back in 2018, the U.S. pulls out of the Iran nuclear deal, so Iran just hits the gas on its nuclear program. Then, October 7, 2023, Hamas, one of Iran's biggest proxies, attacks Israel, kicking off the war in Gaza. That basically activated Iran's entire network. Israel's response was, as we know, massive. They even assassinated Hezbollah's top leader, Hassan Nasrallah. Then came the big one. In April 2024, Israel bombs an Iranian consulate in Syria. That's a huge red line. So Iran retaliates, launching its first ever direct missile attack on Israel. Then they did it again in October. Just like that, the shadow war was over. It was out in the open.
And from there, the conflict just spiraled into a direct all-out military campaign, which sources called Operation Epic Fury. And the human cost, well, it was just horrific. To give you just one example, a single U.S.-Israeli airstrike hit a girls' school in southern Iran. At least 165 children were killed.
Iran's response was a move that hit the entire world where it hurts, the wallet. They declared the Strait of Hormuz closed. Now, you might not know the name, but this little strip of water is one of the most important oil shipping lands on the planet. A huge chunk of the world's oil goes through it. By closing it, Iran instantly turned this regional war into a massive global economic crisis. So when you put it all together, it becomes so clear, doesn't it? This war that we're seeing today didn't just come out of nowhere. It's not a sudden explosion. It is the end result of 100 years of history. It started with collapsing empires and promises that were never meant to be kept. It was lit on fire by a revolution that changed a nation's soul. And it's been fueled for decades by a shadow war of assassins, proxies, and a terrifying nuclear standoff. So we've traced the entire story. We know how we got from quiet partners to sworn mortal enemies. But as this open war rages on, the biggest question of all is the one nobody can answer. The past is written. What will the next chapter be?